Do you believe in alternate universes? You are listening to Delayed Replay, the improvised movie review podcast. Wink. Everything is fine here. We're all fine. Just sit tight and listen to them talk about the movies they definitely saw. Don't delay. We have to listen right away. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Delayed Replay podcast, where we talk about movies, even if it's been a little while since they've come out. We know that you all love hearing people talk about movies, or maybe you missed a movie and you just need a couple of geniuses to recap it. Unfortunately, I'm not a genius, so you'll just have to settle for me. We've also got a guest, and that is Andres Serrano. Andres, what's up, my dude?
Yo, what's up, Steven? Long time no talk, my man.
Yeah, I'm really glad you were able to join me on this. I'm usually at home, even though everyone else in the world goes to like work and school or whatever. I'm really glad to have you on this episode.
I'm really excited. When you told me that we have to talk about movies, I knew I would love it because I spend most of my time watching movies, but usually only the ones that are coming out now. I never really watched movies of old, so I'm really pumped.
Yeah, and we are talking about A Quiet Place Part 2, which came out in March. I saw it in the theater, and I'm guessing you did as well.
I watched it maybe a week after it got released, but either way, still watched it.
Nice. And briefly, what did you think of the first movie that came out a couple years ago?
Oh, well, first of all, absolute masterpiece. I think it was a perfect movie because John Krasinski, man, that man alone makes a movie for me. And so it was super dope to see him in this horror type of scenario. And so I really loved it. There was a few things that I still question, specifically about the monsters, but besides that, I think the movie's really good.
Oh yeah, I definitely loved it. And I've seen John Krasinski in a couple other roles, like comedy or dramedy movie roles, but seeing him in this horror movie that he directed, no less, was pretty surreal. Which is, I guess, it helps that he like grew that beard to kind of shake the Jim from The Office character off of him, but I could still kind of think that in the back of my mind, you know?
That's a really funny thing you bring up because, like, obviously, a lot of people know him as Jim from The Office, but the more roles he's taking and the more he's like doing things outside of comedy, the less and less I see him as Jim, and the more and more I see him as John Krasinski. And I think that's super cool.
Well, that's really good. In my case, I sometimes still slip up and call him Jim Krasinski. And it's like, it would be so much easier for me if he just changed his name to Jim, you know?
He should have. He really should have, just legally.
Yeah, how dare he? Of course, there will be spoilers for this movie, and I guess the first movie as well, if we ever refer to it during this discussion, just for you listeners out there, just so you know. But yeah, like when I saw the first movie, I like had a hot dog, and like when the movie started and it was like super quiet in the movie, I felt super awkward
Having
eating
to
the
take a
hot
bite.
dog. Yeah. Yeah, so like this time I didn't make the same mistake. I ate before going into part 2.
Just jumping the gun into part two just a little bit. It was very interesting to me how less quiet A Quiet Place 2 was. I really felt like there was more noise in part two than there was in part one, which you would think would be the opposite in a series about being very quiet.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like they had to, kind of, because it opens with the flashbacks of the world as it was right when this started.
Oh, so awesome. I love world building. So I was like so into it.
Yeah, and apparently, like, this whole Dark Angel infestation or whatever it's called, it started in 2020. And well, like, what did you think of how people reacted to all the stuff that was going on when these monster or alien things showed up?
I think they portrayed humanity in such a very real way because my favorite version that they do in movies a lot is that everybody stands still and stares. And like obviously as a movie watcher, you're like, of course not. People wouldn't just stand there and stare. But I can promise you that if something just showed up that I've never seen before, I'm gonna stop and take a moment to look at it, you know? So I thought it was very accurate that people would just like be confused and not know what to do and freak out when they were encountered with these aliens, right? Because it's essentially confirmed that they're aliens. So it was pretty dope.
Yeah, it was kind of ambiguous in the first movie, but in this one, we very clearly see them like the opening shot is from space, and you just see them falling down through the atmosphere and basically showing how they came about, which I thought was pretty odd choice. But
I thought so
yeah,
too. I would have liked there to be more ambiguity with them. I'm glad that we got an answer that they're from space, even though it was kind of already implied that they're from space.
right.
So I could have gone without seeing how they got to Earth, rather just knowing that they came from somewhere else. You know?
Yeah, and of course the whole world panics and they start doing this thing because these aliens are out and about. They issue like this social something or other, like this thing where they have to like stay at home and wait for it to blow over, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really interesting. I don't really believe that in a mass panic like this that people would be able to stay home. But clearly, the movie really tries to take this message of like, by together we can like not take over, but we can do anything, you know. And this movie very much shows that like this is a very individual act. Like you are on your own. There's no we. There's only you.
Yeah, like you see all these people who are out for themselves and they for some reason like they hoard toilet paper and TP their houses because they think that'll cancel out sound, and spoiler, it doesn't. Like I
Definitely
don't know
does
what
it.
was going through their minds.
Yeah. No, I definitely think there's a lot of things that wouldn't happen if the world started to end, but who am I to know?
Right, like how are we supposed to know? Everything's perfectly normal in our world right now.
Yep.
Economy's booming and whatnot. So yeah, what did you think of how the flashbacks were sort of interspersed throughout the movie? Would you rather have had like the first half of the movie have all the flashbacks, or did it work like interspersed?
At a certain point, I was like, I get it. I get it. I know where this next flashback's gonna take us. I already know. But I'm always a fan of flashbacks. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a fan of world building a lot. And so nothing's more world building to me than a flashback. I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Lost, but they have flashbacks like throughout episodes, and that's my absolute favorite show of all time because you get so much story going on because of it. And so it was super dope that this movie was able to show flashbacks of day one, like right off the bat. Like you said, we see the aliens spawn, like it's day one, and it's super cool. And I like that later on, she still misses her husband. She has memories of like what he would do for them and how she'd help and all that. So like I thought it was pretty cool. It was just a real nice way to get more John Krasinski in, which I could never get enough of. So it was pretty great.
Yeah, for sure. You raise a good point of how like this was pretty much an excuse to like get more screen time for John Krasinski, which kind of sounds self-serving, but then again, people do love to see him.
I love seeing this man. Like absolutely adore seeing him. So like more John Krasinski, I'll be like, yes, please. Like I'll buy a ticket right now.
That's fair. I've only seen the first 8 episodes of Lost like 5 years ago, but I do know what you mean about like the flashbacks, like informing the characters and whatnot.
Steven, I'm gonna give you homework to watch Lost.
Well, here's the problem. Like, I know how it's gonna end, and I know it's
Well,
like
that's the big thing,
people were
right?
unhappy with it.
Like everybody knows how it ends because of how controversial. It was like the first TV show to have a huge controversial ending, kind of, besides The Sopranos. And so, like, it's funny because you kind of have to know going in, like, wow, everybody hated the end. Because I knew going in that everybody hated the end. And it was funny because now that we live in the era of binging, I was able to just get through it all. You know, seasons 1 through 6, 118 episodes. I was able to get through them all really easily. And the ending is a lot more satisfying when you don't have to wait for 6 or 7 years to finish a show. It's more because you only took like a month to watch it. You're like, oh wow, this ending makes a lot of sense. And like, I really like how they did that. But if I was watching this show for 6 years, Steven, I promise you I would have hated that ending too. I would have hated it as well.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. No spoilers for this show, but I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead, and there are a few seasons where like I could just feel how angry other audience members are getting waiting week to week, as I was also waiting week to week. Thankfully season 9 turned the show around and made it better. But yeah, there's some shows where like it's much better marathoning it as opposed to building up expectations every week or every year or whatever.
I agree. I stopped watching The Walking Dead after like season 3, I believe. And that's when I stopped. I still keep up, but I got into The Walking Dead because I read the comics, and so I then saw the show. And The Walking Dead comics just ended, and not too long ago, and I picked up the final issues because I also stopped reading those for a little while. And like, wow, so
such
good.
A good ending.
So good, Steven. What a phenomenal ending to a comic book. Wow.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Like, The Walking Dead is hands down my favorite comic book series. Like, there are a few others that come pretty close, but it's definitely my favorite.
Oh, so good. So good. We'll have to record another episode just talking about the comic book series because that thing's so good.
That would be so cool. Like, I don't know how we'd work it onto this particular podcast, but you know what? We might. It could be like one of those bonus things. Like, I think that'd be super cool.
I'd be so into it to just talk about that final issue alone. Just that final issue alone deserves a whole episode of talking.
Yeah, so listeners, if you want more homework, you can read the Walking Dead comics in hopes that we might talk about them someday.
But if you don't want to sit down through, 10 years worth of comics, you're more than welcome to just read the first and final issue.
I think it was about 16 years.
God, it ran for a long time. That's all I know. Because I know by the time the show came around, it was already like super, super late in the game. And I was like, wow, what?
Yeah. But speaking of post-apocalyptic stories,
True.
We pick up with in the present day of A Quiet Place Part 2, we pick up with Evelyn and her kids, Regan, Marcus, and did they ever give the baby a name?
You know, I feel like they did, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not one for names. I didn't even remember Evelyn's name or whatever you just said.
See, I had to look at the Wikipedia
Oh, good,
article
because
to brush up on
like
names.
you know, it's called A Quiet Place, so they don't exactly name drop each other that often. so this is just one movie where I'm like, I don't know, the husband, the mother, the child, the deaf one, you know, that new character that was introduced who tried to help them but then betrayed them, you know, like.
Oh yeah, Cillian Murphy. I totally thought he had good intentions, but man,
you know, and they got us good on that one. They really got us good on that one, in my opinion. You know, like
yeah, he and his friend, who's played by I think Jimon Unsu or something. I can't remember his character's name, but who remembers any of these characters' names?
Yeah. And like they really had us going because you're like, wow, they found someone. Of course, it's a post-apocalyptic movie, so of course it's about to hit the fan. And then it does, and you're like, that baby's gonna die. That baby's gonna die. Like, no lies.
Right. I was like worried the whole movie for the baby.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like they kind of skipped over the shotgun scene at the end of the movie, and it's like we didn't even get to see what happens right after that with them like shooting up the other aliens, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I don't like that, man. I was really excited because that first movie ends on such like what, and then number two just starts with like they're already traveling, and you're like, what? Wait, I want to see the coolness of how they escaped after the shotgun.
Yeah, and like they're traveling to Alabama for some reason. Like I was talking about this with my roommate, but it was like, why don't they just go to Niagara Falls if waterfalls are that effective in canceling out sound?
Steven, I've
And,
never thought
yeah.
about that. I've never thought about that. You are so right. Why not go to somewhere where there's incredible amounts of noise?
Yeah, like I don't understand this
If they traveled
Alabama
all the way
plot.
to
Like,
Alabama, why didn't they just travel to Niagara Falls? You're so right. Obviously,
like they live in New York State. It's not even that far away. So like, why the heck go to Alabama?
they kind of touch on like that we have family out there. I hear the military setting up out there. Like, but like now that you bring it up, Steven, Niagara Falls, there's probably a whole booming city there. Like people are probably living so nice out there.
Yeah, you know what? I think might know like an out of the universe reason for why they maybe didn't want to do Niagara
All
Falls.
right, hit me. Hit me.
I think maybe John Krasinski would have thought it was too reminiscent of The
Wedding
Office
with
because you know
Pam.
you have that. Yeah, like I think maybe he was trying too hard to not remind people of The
Oh,
Office.
true, true. Because then people would have been like, how they came back to where Jim and Pam got married. Which, may I say, side note, Steven, that is my favorite episode of all The Office, is their wedding. It's so good.
Oh, see, my favorite episode is what was it called? It's the one where Dwight. Oh, it's called Stress Relief, where Dwight makes everyone think there's a
Oh,
fire and everyone's
yes.
like running around. It's chaotic.
Stay
They're like
calm!
every man for himself. And Kevin like throws a chair at the vending machine, breaks the glass, and takes some steps.
Yes.
So good.
I think the wedding was my favorite because it's like a accumulation of like everything, you know, like all these characters, like everybody all in one place. Like the show had been building up to this moment. So that's why that's my favorite moment. But that episode that you're talking about is so good. It's so memeable too. It gets memed all the time because
Yeah.
it's so good.
John Krasinski didn't steer completely away from stuff that's kind of like on The Office. Like you do see people panicking and breaking machines in the flashbacks and stuff, and even in the present day. So like, I think he was overreacting with like steering away from Niagara
I think so
Falls.
too. I think so too. I think Niagara Falls, now that you mention it, would have been perfect.
Well, we're on the topic of like funny things. Were there any moments in the movie that you thought were humorous, either intentionally or unintentionally?
So intentionally that I thought was humorous was in the flashbacks, she's worried about her coffee creamer. Like that they won't have any more coffee creamer for themselves. But not not intentionally funny was the bubble wrap scene. You know, where clearly there's things that they're being cushioned by bubble wrap, but bubble wrap is so loud. And so the moment they're like bubble wrap, I was like, oh my goodness gracious, what? What? They're like, what items can we find in the real world that will make a lot of sound? Ah, yes, bubble wrap, of course.
Yeah, like I get that it's supposed to be an obstacle, but I mean, come on, how can you not laugh about bubble
Yeah,
wrap.
man. It
Like,
was like the true enemy is not the aliens. It is the bubble wrap now. Like what?
yeah, I thought it was also unintentionally funny, but also kind of relatable when the kids were like eating goldfish crackers, but then that turned out to be super loud. So then the family had to like really run.
Yes. Yes, because chewing goldfish crackers is so surprisingly loud. Thank God they didn't have Cheez-Its. Like, thank God.
Are Cheez-Its louder than goldfish crackers?
Uh, I would say so because I think they're harder, you know? They're like because goldfish are like num 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 num. But a Cheez-It, you're like crunch, crunch, crunch.
Oh man, you just reminded me of like this trip to Yosemite. I went with a few friends one
Tell me
time,
about it.
and it was like snowing, and there was like ice on the ground, and one of my friends was like stomping on the ice, be like
Oh.
crunch, and it just became like this memeable thing that we
Now, I'm
started doing.
assuming you figured that the ice was thick, right? It was not thin ice.
Well, the ice itself was like it wasn't a frozen lake or whatever. It was like ice that was like
Oh, just on about.
on the dirt.
Got it, got it.
Yeah.
I thought you were telling me you're on a
Yeah.
frozen lake, and I was like, Steven, that's so dangerous.
Yeah. And it was dangerous for the family in the movie
You're
as
right.
well.
You're right. It was all dangerous for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess they thought that the frozen lake would be the safest route, but I mean, come on, that was just too dangerous of them to do.
Yeah, yeah. It was cool to see the alien break the ice and fall in, but I don't know. I would have taken the safer route around personally, but I'm not from the East Coast, so I don't know like how much bravery it takes to cross those things. But as a West Coast person, I would never. I would never.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm more of a beach person, and with the ocean, you know what you're
Yeah.
getting. With frozen lakes, I'm not sure what to do with that, so just steer away
Like
from
I've
it.
seen videos of like about frozen lakes and whatnot, and it's so scared me that you that you straight up could just like fall through because that one part of the lake might be thin ice. Like what? What? Luckily the alien weighed too much, so like they did that classic shot where like it takes one step and it like slightly cracks. And you're like, ah, I know where this is going.
Yeah, I did think the dubstep track that they played during that moment was out of
So out of
place,
place.
but
So
I
out of
don't,
place.
I don't know. What do you think of the music choices in this movie?
Um, well, let's touch upon this dubstep track real quick, right? Like it
Sure,
added a
sure.
lot of like tension, but it also kind of added some funk to it, and I was like, I don't know about this one, John. I don't know about this one. Like it's a cool action running sequence, but why dubstep? You could have done like classical score for this one. Like just get some string violins or something up in here.
It just makes the movie louder, right? Like it feeds into that same problem where this movie is
This
louder
was
than the
so
first one
loud,
in many
man. This
ways.
movie was so much louder than the other one. Because the other one, you're like, they had a lot of moments of silence, and then whenever there was sound, you're like, things are about to get real, you know? But this one, I felt like everything was loud all throughout. And I think like the movie theater heightened the sound to like such an like loud level because they thought the movie would be quiet that like it was kind of like bad how loud this movie was. No, like this is called a quiet place, and this is nothing but like a war scene.
Yeah, and like the theater I went to was pretty crowded, pretty full, and everyone's like trying to stay quiet because like they know from experience, like the first movie and that whole atmosphere. But I could see like even in the dark that lots of people are like scratching their heads and turning to each other and being like, really, is this really happening? And like just being baffled by these weird choices that John Krasinski made.
Man, but like that dubstep scene, so out of place, so out of place. I'll tell you something though. They had one really cool score, and it was when they're going through the forest to get to Alabama. There was this really, really dope score. I should probably look it up later to like find out the name of it. Um, but it was so eerie, you know, like the violin made it sound like there was a monster in the distance, like always creeping up on you, and like it was super cool that they have to silently go through a forest, and I thought that was super rad. The music really heightened up that moment, like by a lot to me.
Yeah, I agree. Like that whole violin part, it to me sounded very reminiscent of a couple of the Evil Dead movies,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought really made it a great scene because it harkened back to that like real sense of horror, and it's like you are in this environment where like anything could happen and like no one
Yeah,
is
I would
safe.
think it's even my favorite scene of the whole movie because of what you just mentioned. It's very horror like because the rest of the movie kind of feels like a little bit more on the thriller end more than anything. And that scene very much brought it back to A Quiet Place 1, where like danger can be around any corner. Like we have to be quiet. Things are scary. Things are very real. And I really like that scene a lot.
Yeah, what scene shocked you the most, do you think?
Um, when sound bad. Uh, the scene that shocked me the most was when the kid grabbed the gun, and that's it. Like just because I was like, a child should not be holding a gun. What is this? But not the scene had no weight to it. You know, the kid was just grabbing the gun to give it to the mother. But to me, I was like, you're gonna have that little kid grab you the shotgun? What is this? What is this? So the real shock value did not come from the movie. The real shock value came from a child should not be handling a shotgun.
Right, I hear what you mean. Well, because of the premise of this movie, it's like you can kind of believe that like a child would do that in this
You're right. You're
setting,
completely right.
but
Mm-hmm.
it is definitely something that makes you think, though.
You know, I love post-apocalypse movies, and this one definitely like really hits on that. That like in a post-apocalypse, the world really changes, and people really have to adapt to their environment. You know, and so of course, like to me, this I don't know how old this kid is, like 10 or whatever, has to like grabbing a shotgun. To me, I'm like, a kid should never be grabbing a shotgun. Like this is wild. But if you put yourself in the framework of a post-apocalypse, that kid probably already knows how to shoot the dang thing, you know? And so it's very this movie really shows how they've had to adapt to the world, especially at the end. Because at the beginning, like when they the beginning, quote unquote, it's more like halfway, where they discover like more people and like she gives her speech about like how there's people out there we have to save and whatnot. And they have that awesome train scene and like I forget that actor's name you just mentioned not too long ago, but like he comes to save the girl in the train. That was super cool. And so I think it really just brings up this they have to adapt by the end of the movie. Like they have adapted to this world and they will now be helping others adapt to this world type of situation.
Yeah, and when the people band together and they can hear that there's this looming threat and they think it's the aliens again, this was a moment that shocked me was when they go searching on the other side of the forest to this like other
Mm-hmm.
town, and they're seeing if there are like any more
Mm-hmm.
people there so that they can unite the two towns. But when they get there, like there are these clotheslines and like these rotted corpses hanging on
Yeah.
clothes
Yeah, that was
hangers, and
wild. That was wild.
it's like, oh dang, like did the aliens do this or did people do this and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
why?
And you know, this very much comes like into what we were just talking about earlier about The Walking Dead too, you know, like these scenarios really paint up this dystopian world where humanity has fallen. Like humanity isn't human, you know? And so it's real interesting that A Quiet Place touched upon these tones when the true enemy is the aliens. But in this movie, they created a second enemy, which is other humans. And so I thought it was super wild when they went to that town. Like these corpses are like hanging and like they're just rotting out there. And like you see a katana like in like through someone's chest and like all this stuff, which I think was a reference to The Walking Dead, but that's just me. Yeah,
Yeah, with
I
Michelle.
think that katana was like a clear reference to like we're hinting at like like post apocalypse katana people. Uh, but you know, I think they really tried to touch upon humanity in this one more than the monster when they did in the first one, which I was down with, but I was here for the alien storyline more than I was for the we need to adapt and become one as a people and blah blah blah.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of, I guess there's this trope called Just Here for Godzilla, where people will just see a Godzilla movie for the sole purpose of just seeing Godzilla. So I don't know if that's similar to what you're talking
You know,
about, but
like to say I was like here for the aliens and only the aliens would be wrong, but I was definitely there being like, I want to see the sound element more than anything. You know, I'm here for this family trying to survive now without John Krasinski in this post-apocalyptic world. And the biggest issue is not other people, which it clearly became that's the issue. But what I want to see is the biggest issue is how do you live in a world with no sound and you now have a baby? Because the first one, the whole big deal was that she was pregnant and that she had the kid. Like that was a huge deal in the first one. And the second one, the whole movie revolves around this baby and like that, and that's why the people turn on him. But I wanted to see more of the survival due to sound than I wanted to see the survival for survival's sake.
yeah, I was very surprised to see that Channing Tatum was like leading these murderers, the ones who like hung people on
Talk
the
about
clothes
another moment that
hangers,
caught me
and
off guard. Talk about another moment.
yeah, what'd you think of his
You
performance
know,
here?
Channing Tatum has such range, and I very much like that he had a very composed attitude to him. You know, he looked very stiff and stern, and I have range as an actor type of situation. Um, I don't think his character was needed whatsoever, though. I don't think his character added anything to the story. I don't know if it's the performance. I don't know if it's the writing. I don't know what it was, but I think he was just not needed. Like they didn't need a leader. They did. Channing Tatum didn't need to be the movie. That was just like surprise cameo.
Right. Like I do like his performances in the Jump Street movies.
Mm-hmm,
Those
mm-hmm.
are hilarious. And Smallfoot was really good. Which, side tangent, recently I watched these three animated movies that have Yetis in them that came out like within the
Uh-huh.
same year. And I watched them as if they were a trilogy, like just pretending
Dear
that they're in the
Lord.
same universe. So so if you ever want to do that, watch Link and then Abominable and then
Oh, did all
Smallfoot.
you're
They're
so right.
actually
All
all
these did come
they're
out within a
actually all
year of each
pretty
other,
good.
didn't they? That's so funny.
They're all like around the same amount of quality in my opinion. Like I think they're all pretty good.
Well, I may just give it a try.
But
I may just give it a try.
yeah, but I do agree here that Channing Tatum was not needed in this particular movie. Like it kind of shifted the focus away
The
from
family,
the
man. Like
like yeah. It's like one moment you're like following the family and then you get this like 10-minute monologue slash flashback of what Channing Tatum has been through and it's like I don't
yup.
care.
I'm
I'm here
here
for
for
the
the family. I'm
family.
not here for a new character, which I will probably never see again. Like, come on.
Well, I mean, it'd be hard to see him again, seeing how he got
Yeah,
beheaded
very
by
fair.
the
Very
aliens
fair.
at the end.
you you are so right. He did get demolished by the aliens.
Yeah, I do like that they brought the aliens back at least before
God, I
the end,
know.
though.
After a whole movie of like, we're worried about the aliens. It's kind of like a Jaws moment, except not done right, where they're like, the aliens out there. And then like you know it's out there, but because you're so dealing with this human problem, like you don't got time for this alien problem. So I'm glad at the very end we dealt with aliens once more.
Right, and fortunately, they are able to like find a way to evade them. Like, of course, that some of these people get killed by the aliens, and it's really sad. You get this really melancholic score that I
Mm-hmm.
think really works. But they find this fountain that is somehow still working, and they tried to hide in that since like the water like I guess they didn't steer too far away from the waterfall idea, but I wasn't sure if the fountain idea was as effective as, say, a
You
waterfall,
know,
you know?
as they were hiding in the fountain, it was cool just because of the symbolism of how like they're being submerged in the world and all this cool stuff. And I didn't think the alien aspect of it was touched upon properly, but I do really like the ending because though I'm here for the aliens, I thought that whole final sequence with them hiding in the fountain and the symbolism of the world and like you see like the forest looks really dark around them and like the only lit part of the scene is like the fountain and these monsters are going around and then they hear a giant noise in the distance and they all the aliens like disappear off into the forest and as the family climbs out of the fountain and walks towards the buildings they find the radio that like has like the transmission that like they will be receiving help and whatnot. It was all super cool. I just the aliens just being told to buzz off, not really digging it in this movie. Like aliens really seem like a second-hand problem rather than a first-hand problem. But I like this ending. I like the symbolism. I like it all. I like that there will be a third one, and it really implies how the third one will go. But at the same time,
Right. Like you saw the post
I
credit
did
scene,
not. There's a
right?
post-credit scene.
Oh yeah, like the post credit scene. I
Well,
don't know
might
if you
as
want
well
me
tell
to
me.
tell you, like. All right, so in this post credit scene, for some reason it's in black and white, and you can hear some jazz music, and then all of a sudden you see this person wearing a beekeeper uniform, and it's like, who the heck is this? And like, they don't really answer that question. And I feel like this was not hinted at all. It came out of left field. I felt like in this instance, John Krasinski was throwing in more questions than answers, and it just did not work for me. But it does hint at what's to come in the third
Well,
movie.
hmm, let's see. Well, what's fascinating about that, Steven, is like I obviously did see the end credit sequence, so I didn't know this, but I don't know if it comes so left field because remember, there's that slight line, Steven, where the children ask about the children ask the mom about what her family was like, and she says she was raised on a bee farm, so like might be her dad, might be.
Might
Oh,
be her
got me
dad.
there. It might be her dad.
You're totally
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
because like
catch that.
that feels like such a little like hint on why they would show a beekeeper at the end. And it might be that maybe it's her father who sends out the transmission at the end of the movie because obviously that's not answered. That's not answered at all. We're just led to trust this transmission. Oh, while we're on the topic, what'd you think of the final shot of the movie as it's zooming out of Alabama, of course, as it's zooming out and we just see the world in complete chaos and disarray and we see the creatures like just running and like well obviously we don't see them running, we just see trees like shaking a lot in a specific lines. What do you think of that final shot? Because I thought it was like super cool to show the whole world is screwed, like the whole world is screwed, like there's no safe place.
Well, it's kind of weird because I do admire the attention to detail that went into making that shot. But with the first movie, I really liked how it was really focused and sort of a bottled story where you only follow a few characters and don't see a whole lot of the outside world. But here, obviously, like this movie,
Focuses on the
pretty
outside
much,
world.
yeah, like it opens the can of worms and you see all the worms, and some
Yeah,
of it
yeah.
isn't pretty.
You bring up a good point that like the first one is very much the family story. And I guess this is what we've been talking about the entire time, right? That like the first one was the family story, and that's why we really like the first one, or at least I really like the first one. And the second one is definitely John Krasinski opening the world and showing us more. And I guess it had to happen because how much of the story of a bottled story, as you call it, can you like really do with this family? You know, if when they have to travel, and because they had to travel after the whole shotgun incident at the end of the first one, it's kind of hard not to open that can of worms. You know, it's kind of hard to not explore what is out there and answer the questions that I guess some of the community had. But I thought the final shot was super cool. I definitely think the third one might go bigger than even the second one. I already thought the second one was pretty big, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like I want to go back to A Quiet Place 1 more than anything.
Yeah, well, John Krasinski said in an interview last week that the third one is going to be in 3D.
Well, I will certainly wear my glasses. I can do that. I can handle that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to be the type of 3D where it's just depth and doesn't feel out of place, or if it'll be like, yo, alien right up in your face. And like, I feel like there's a danger in that being unintentionally hilarious, because if you watch something like Jaws 3D or Friday the 13th 3D, there are shots where it's like, oh, obviously the yo-yo is supposed to go up to your face, like in 3D.
Obviously, they're panning to this 3D idea.
Yeah, so I don't know how I feel about that, but like I feel like the first movie would have been fine as a standalone, but now that they're exploring more with these sequels, it's like, well, I guess they have to try.
Steven, would you also call it a stepping stone? Perhaps.
By standalones and stepping stones, lemons loom like rain, my fantasy horror comedy novel on Amazon, StevenSchinder.com. So that's one of my plugs, super early. But so who do you think was the real MVP of this movie?
Huh. I would have to say it is that new character. God, his name slips me, but the guy they find, the first guy, the one who betrays them. Yeah.
Cillian Murphy's character.
Because at the end, obviously, he gains his humanity and like he sees what he's doing is wrong and that they have to unite together. But I thought he was a real MVP for realizing it and then taking charge, you know, and fulfilling the role that John Krasinski fulfilled in the first one. And I really liked that he was able to step up and be the hero that the movie needed because there was no real hero in the situation. And I really liked that. Of course, it cost him his life, and we will not be seeing him later. But I really liked the moment where he stepped up and he was able to be John Krasinski to his family.
Yeah, that's fair. Like in terms of the role, or I guess the actions that he does, like he'd be the MVP in that regard. So I guess I'd agree with you on that if we're just going by like their actions. But if I were to say who the MVP was in terms of just like acting chops, I thought that Jimon Hansu's character had like the best dialogue and was just like super believable and immersive. You could believe all the hurt he'd experienced in the past.
You know, his character was in fact the most believable in this crazy post-apocalypse. What was your favorite line of his? Because he doesn't have many, but each one feels way more important than the last.
Oh, so my favorite line of his, this is gonna sound kind of cheesy because it has the title of the movie in it, or part of the title of the movie, but when he's like, I lived in a world where there was too much noise and there was so much chaos, and all I yearned for was a quiet place. I was like the only one in my theater who was like, oh, because like every once in a while I need a quiet place to like heal and think about life and whatnot, you know?
It wasn't because it's the name of the movie. It was because you really related to it.
Well, I mean, if I didn't relate to it, I probably would have thought it was super cheesy, but yeah.
I think my favorite quote has to come from I think the mother, you know, the main character, I guess. and it's her short speech that she gives to her kids before they go back into the unknown, and it's not one of hope. It's one where she's very real with them, and she tells them she may die or something may happen, and that if something were to occur, that they have to put on the bravest face and they have to keep pushing forward, and that they would have to essentially just find someone new to be able to take care of them. And I really liked it because it was a very real moment, in the movie. She like can't put up this facade. She can't be the hero all the time. She needs her children to understand that they live in a world that is in absolute chaos and they have to be prepared for something like that.
Yeah, I do love the more human moments of the movie. So those moments
Hmm.
like really saved it for me. I guess we'll go into final thoughts. So what are your final thoughts on this movie and score out
I'll
of
go
10?
backwards. I'll start with my score. I think this movie deserves a solid 8 out of 10. It's not the greatest film or anything, but I definitely do think John Krasinski is changing the landscape of these type of horrors, just like Jordan Peele is also changing the landscape of these modern horror films. I think they're very much doing things that we hadn't seen before. Obviously, we never talked about the cinematography. We never talked about like all those small details that like really make this movie. Because I know most of this has been like us joking and bagging on the movie, but it was actually really good in my opinion. And there's just so many details we didn't get to touch upon, like the shot of the leaves when they were falling, the shot of the landscapes, the subtle sound cues that happen throughout the movie that make you wonder: is it a monster? Or is it just a part of the world that they live in now? And so there's so many small things I really liked about this film that I was totally invested in. And so it's not a perfect film; it like leagues from it, but I do think it's really good for what it's trying to handle. I would definitely recommend it to people, but I would also tell people that number one is better than number two.
Right, you make a good point. Like all the shots of the ears of corn, and it's supposed to be symbolic of
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
ears, listening, sound, and I thought those shots were gorgeous. For me, the first movie is like a 9 out of 10. With this sequel having some
Oh yeah.
unintentional
Huh.
funny moments and some weird choices and whatnot, which are sometimes brief and sometimes too long. It kind of felt like it wasn't balanced enough for me. Like I didn't hate it. There are lots of things I really loved, like the acting and the human moments, like we've touched upon. So I guess for me, A Quiet Place Part Two would be a 7.5
Okay.
out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah, so not too far from your score, but that's the beauty of these things. Like you can get a couple people discussing the same movie, and they'll have different opinions, and it'll
Hmm.
make for an
Hmm.
interesting discussion.
So, Steve, now that I have you here, uh what's next on your list of movies to review? What's coming next? Because I know this is a hot year for movies,
Uh,
in my opinion. So, what are you gonna be talking about?
oh yeah, so there are a few that have already come out that I want to talk about, and some that are coming up real soon,
Hmm.
as of when we're recording this. So on my tentative schedule, I have The New Mutants as the next one.
Yes.
That's coming out, and Black
Oh,
Widow,
so
and
so pumped.
yeah, and Wonder Woman 1984. I've been really excited for
The
that
first Wonder
one
Woman was
too.
so good. I didn't like the villain,
Um,
but I really liked the movie.
yeah, and I do kind of want to talk about the Milan movie. I'm
Ah,
not
here.
sure
Yes,
when.
yes, yes.
Yeah, there are a few others like Spiral, F9, of a Fast and
You know,
Furious
I haven't
sequel.
seen a Fast and
I still
Furious
need.
movie since Fast and Furious 6. So good luck to you.
Right. So just like pulling up the tentative schedule just so I can look at it. Oh, that 007 movie, No Time to Die, that'll be discussed as well. There's
Oh,
a
Candyman's getting a
Candyman
remake?
remake. Oh
No.
yeah, you didn't see the trailer for that? I
Yeah.
gotta send that to you after this. But yeah, and Pixar movie Soul, Top Gun Maverick. I do want to talk about the Bob's Burgers movie sometime after it comes out. And of course, you got stuff like Morbius, Venom 2, The Eternals, Ghostbusters Afterlife. So I guess that's a taste of what to kind of expect. Still sorting out like the schedule and potential guests to
That's super
have
rad.
on.
That's super rad.
And with that, I guess we'll call it a day or whatever on this discussion.
Oh, thank you.
Andres, thank you for joining me. If people want to follow you and what you're up
Oh,
to, where can they find
wow.
you?
You know, I made social media just to be connected with my video game friends. So almost all of my social media is at Pojeki, which is Pojeki. And that's probably where you can find me on most things, especially Instagram and whatnot. Uh, and that's about it, really. If you just search that, you can probably find me anywhere.
All right, sounds good. And like I said, I'm Steven Schinder, self-published novelist. You can find my work at stevenschinder.com and on Amazon. I'm at Steven Schinder on Twitter and Instagram, and also have a Facebook page, Steven Schinder Storytelling. And to all you listeners, if you want to get in touch with the podcast, the easiest way would be to email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. What did you think of A Quiet Place Part 2? Did we gloss over anything? What do you think of The New Mutants or any of the other movies we mentioned? Feel free to reach out, and if you want, we could read your responses on here and reply. Now, because of when we're recording and releasing these episodes, it might take a little bit for you to get a response, but I guess you could consider it a delayed reply, so somewhat fitting. Again, next time we'll be discussing The New Mutants. Thank you, listeners, and without further delay, have a good day. The episode is finished. And now this is A Quiet